There is an eastern part of Ukraine, and we lived here in Zaporizhia before the war started. And my husband's parents are living in Vasilivka. It's just 40 kilometers from Zaporizhia, and now this area is occupied by Russians. So they had to leave this Vasilivka and try to flee here to Germany.
Anna and Artem Kadzhoyan are from Zaporizhia region, and they are living now here in Baden-Württemberg in Germany. And they just escaped the country as an intellectual couple, a doctor and journalist. How came for your life this decision to leave the country? Was this war that it will be also in your region to feel also before, or it was totally abrupt and suddenly? You wrote an interesting text where you was writing that you already had some feelings and some nightmares that it might also be in your city and your life. So you were feeling it before. What was the point? What motivated you to feel that this war will come also into Zaporizhia region?
I actually not a political oriented person, so I never watch news or something like that. But many friends of us are talking about the war for almost 6 months before the war started at February. So it was not my decision to have a fear of it, but was something inner fear of something bad will happen soon. So the war was very sudden for us and unexpectedly. And on the 24th of February, my husband woke me up and said the war started. It was shocked, and we didn't know what to do actually. And then we spent 1 day in whole mess, going from one room to another, try to collect water from sink, and maybe bomb will take on us, and we actually don't know what to do. And the next day we went down to a shelter, bomb shelter in our home, hearing all this signals, like fire signal alarming all over the city, and it was dark there, no fresh air, and it feared us very much. And then we, after the siren stopped, we get up to our flat, sitting and talking for half an hour, and decided that we need to be safe. And we pack our luggage, our whole life in 3 suitcases, get to a car, I, my mom and my 3 children, and went to West Ukraine for the first few days. And then when the war was in progress, we decided to leave the country at all, because there was so long queue on the borders, 3-day queue, and we cannot wait so long. It was very stressful for mine 3 children there, so little.
So you left the country direction Moldavia, you went at the border Kadzhoyan or another border station?
We went to Chernivtsi, and it's near the Mama Liga checkpoint. Mama Liga is near the Moldova region. So we crossed the border at Moldova, then to Lipki, I remember Lipki maybe, yeah, crossed to Romania, and all night I drove the car through Romania, and then to Austria, Hungary, and Germany, at least.
And were you also stopping in these places?
I stopped 2 times, one in Romania for 2 hours just to sleep, because I was driving for 18 hours without stop, and I was very exhausted. So I need to have a rest for some hours, and then we have a real night in a hotel in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our last point until we got to Germany.
So you haven't even stopped in Hungary, so
Yeah.
you were not there. In that
So
way.
I was totally 3 days 3 days driving.
Mm. When you decided to join your wife and family, and what have you done in that time from the beginning of the war until you left the country? How you prepared yourself, but also your colleagues, as of you are that time a leader of an oncological clinic. So you had the responsibility for your co-workers and also eventually some patients.
Okay, I will tell you in a few words from my point of view how it was. Anya told about her feelings, and what about me? The first day of the war, the Russians, the enemy, came almost 200 kilometers, and when you see that, you understand that no battles on their way, so in one day they will be in our town, and the time was stopped, and it seemed to me that we decided several days what to do, but really it was maybe about one day, and we decided that the safety of the family is the most important thing. That's why they left Zaporizhia in one day after the war starts. And also I told Anya that I couldn't make this with them. But what about the law of Ukraine? I could sit with them into the car and came out the country because I has 3 children, but I couldn't because of the responsibility. I was the CEO of the oncologic private clinic, so I stay here because lots of my colleagues stayed here, and I felt that I need to help the people who I am responsible for. But fortunately, the Russian troops were stopped in about 40 kilometers from the Zaporizhia. But all this time, maybe 1 month, I think lots of Zaporizhian people lived in a sense that you never know what will be in 1 hour, maybe in 1 day. And all my plans and all my thoughts were how to live here if they will be here in 1 day. So I packed all the bags, I packed all the medications for myself. So I prepared to stay at home, for example, for 2 weeks, because if the street battles will happen, you can't go out because you understand what it means. But this didn't happen. That's why I came to my work, and about 1 week we stopped to work. But we had lots of oncologic patients. That's why we restarted our work. It was 3 times a week, and we helped them as much as we could. But there was lots of problems, lack of medications, stopped logistic all over the Ukraine, lots of problems. But we did all that we could in this situation. Then afterwards, when I understood that the situation is stable, I was studying. It's about 2 months after the war started. I started to seek how can I rejoin my family. You know, it's like you can't understand what be the next. You can't understand what be with your future. The main thing is that your family is safe. That's why for 2.5 months I made all the most important questions. What about the living? What about our properties? What about my work? I made all what about work for the business to continue. I resigned as a CEO of clinic because I have the people who took my work, my partners, and in 4 months I came here because, you know, 4 months it's too much not seeing your family, your children, your wife, and the time dictates its rules. All this stuff has consequences, and you must understand if you won't see your family, there may be consequences. What about the future of this family? Fortunately, I have this possibility to come here legally, but unfortunately lots of Ukrainian men don't have such possibility. Lots of them went to a war. Lots of them stayed locally to defend their towns. Yeah, so everyone makes its choice, and you know, my point of view that there is no the correct choice. Every choice is correct. Everyone is choosing what to do, and you can't criticize the choice of every. It may be woman or man. I think it's my position. And now I'm here to see and to help my wife with 3 children, because it's they are at the age which is the most important in their life. The youngest is about 2 years, and the oldest one is about 7 years. And what you gain in the YAS, it will make your future as a person. So we have another life now.
Your parents are living, and you lived earlier at a small town called Vasilyevka, what is now under Russian occupation. It is not far from Zaporizhia. How is the situation there? You have now contacts to people who stayed locally there. What they say to you, or the contact has been broken since the occupation, and how is now the border? Is it to cross easily from Vasilyevka to Zaporizhia, or is it closed down? Or how could, for example, your parents leave the Vasilyevka region to get to Ukraine and even further?
So the situation about this town where I was born is awful, because this town is near the front, so it's a front town, and lots of cases of bombing were happening, and lots of destroying and even death of people because of this bombing were present. I have lots of friends in there. I tell you that lots of the young people, they came out of the town with difficulties, but if you want to leave it, during this 4th month of occupation, lots of young people from this town went out, because they understand that the first, it's very dangerous to stay here because of everyday battling, bombing, etc. And the second, the time in this town stopped. The young people understood that there is no any future for their kids, for them, no work, no normal, how to say, conditions for living, for normal living, for that life that they had before. So they left, and lots of them are living in Zaporizhia, including in our flats and house in Zaporizhia. And this territory is occupied about 4 months, and every new day lots of my friends and people from Vasilyevka, they understood that the more time passes, the less chances to have their homes back. And unfortunately, they now are not so optimistic as we want to be. Yeah. What about how to live it? You know, there are no rules for every person. It is his own story. Because one is out today and tomorrow they can't left others of people. What about my parents? They were lucky, because my father is Caucasian, and he met a Caucasian at this post, and they have a small talk, and they found good things about their nations. And my parents are old one, so they said, you can go. It was the story about my parents. And they go, but there were lots of bombing during the come through the gray zone of between the Russian and Ukrainian troops. But fortunately they did it, and after 2 weeks I helped them to go to Deutschland, to Germany, by their car. So, for example, my mother, she understands that little chance to go back, but my father, he is very fond of the place where they lived, and nevertheless, all the occupation, he says that in 2 months he wants to go back. But we don't know what will be in 2 months. The situation is staying acute and tense. And I told you that when the war started, I was planning only 1 day in my life, 1 day. How to be safe and what to do tomorrow. And what must I be doing if some situation happens. So I calculate all the situations that might have happened. But now, after 4 months, the situation is a little bit better. I think about 1 month long my planning, you know, but it's not to plan a year, 2 or 3. And our family is lucky to be safe, and this is the most important for now. To be safe, my children, they didn't see the war, and this is very important, because I know the children and I know families who saw the war, who were living in occupied Vasilivka for 3 months, and they lived in their bomb shelters without any conditions for living more than 1 month, and they saw their homes where they lived before, and they saw them destroyed from the tanks, Russian tanks and missiles. So they are lucky to be alive, but the children can't sleep without their parents. When they came to me in Zaporizhia, they slept in one bed, and the children are rather a big one, because they have this stress. And now the children are safe in Germany also, from this family, and then they don't want to go back. It's easy for the children to decide that we don't want to go back, we like here. But for the people at the high age, it's not so easy to decide, because all their life they socialized in Ukraine. They like Ukraine. We also like Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We dream about free Ukraine.
But for the future of ours and our children, we are open, and we are ready to change our lives. We don't know how it will be, but
yeah, we don't have the exact decision now.
We're
Because
open
when
for
I
changes.
left Ukraine, I hope that in 10 days we will come back and the war will stop, like all people who fled Ukraine. But as you see, we are here for 4 months already, and our children now went to kindergarten, and in 1 month my son will go to school here. So no 10 days victory. So we are waiting and believe in ZSU.
And you know, everyone understands now that this war won't stop in 1 month to minimum 1 year. So we must think about worse events, and then it will be okay and good if we are wrong. But the experience taught us that you can't be waiting for the end of the war, that it will be soon, because it takes your life. When you are sitting, you're sitting and waiting for the miracle. You must live usual life, and for my family, I'm glad that these 4 months they used not waiting and looking into the window, but they were socializing with the place they are here, and with the people around. And they succeeded in this, I think.
How is the situation of Zaporizhia in case of national identity? As of mostly it's like that. The western Ukraine is very pro-Ukrainian, and the eastern Ukraine is rather pro-Russian. Is this division true, or just a simplification of the media, or how is the concrete situation in Zaporizhzhia city and Zaporizhzhia Oblast region.
So we are Russian-speaking family from Zaporizhzhia. We know very good Ukrainian language, but we were growing up speaking Russian, and we always continued to speak it, and even afterwards the situation with the 14th year when the war was on the Donbass, when Crimea was taken off the Ukraine. So that proves the fact that no limitations of Russian-speaking language or Russian-speaking Ukrainians are present.
No restrictions.
Are present in Ukraine. These are all lies of the Russian, you know, and all the Russian government is talking about the last 8 years. These are all lies. They say that they want to be nearer to Ukrainians. They say that we are the same folk, the same people, the same nation with deep roots. But their actions are otherwise their words. And we this starting from the 14th years, and as the people who analyze, who sees, who don't take the propaganda to their hearts, all the attempts of Russians to nearer to us ends in the enlarging of this distance. So the more their attempts, the less they succeeded. Because all they say are lies, and starting from 14 years, our identification changed more to the Western world, which are more freedom, which are more free, and we don't take the position of Russian people, and we don't take the values they show the world. We have another values, and this identification that we are different nations is getting stronger, and we are not the brothers, obviously. But if you ask me how what is my attitude to concrete Russian people, it's not so as my attitude to all the nation, because I will check, I will speak, I will have a deal with these Russian people, and it's okay. I think there are lots of good people in Russia. Lots of them left the Russia for some period because they don't agree, but they can't speak freely in their country. That's why they left their country and waiting for it to change. Let me see.
Yeah, and I can add that here in Germany I'd met so many people from Russia who came here many years ago, and they will help me and my family with books, with furniture, with everything. They try to be closer to Ukrainians and say that we are with you, not with Putin. But of course some people are pro-Putins in Germany too.
Everyone choose its way to think, what to see, with whom to talk, and it may have some consequences. So you understand, for example, my mother, she's 72, and she's the other proof that the Russians make something wrong. Because all her life she was pro-Russian, because she was born in Soviet Union. She took education here and all the cultural manner, and she lives in Ukraine for 30 years, but she always liked Russia, Russian people. Starting with 2014 year, when the Donbass and Crimea problem was on set, she said that Russian is not Putin, Putin is not Russia. But afterwards, after this war starts, she felt herself all the Russian love. And you know, we have lots of information from social media, and we saw that not only Putin thinks the way he is talking, but thousands, hundred thousands of Russian, I think millions of Russian thinks that Ukrainians are wrong, that Ukrainians must pay the price of being bombed, that we are guilty in what are happening in Ukraine. Lots of Russians think that this is geopolitics, but it's easy to think that that is geopolitics, and the USA and the Western people are guilty of what is happening. That it was like their reaction to what is happening in the world, but the answer is easy. You are coming to another country and you are killing people, and it's not about geopolitics. It's about your values, and it's about your mental mind, you know. And we in Ukraine, the first months, the people were shocked. Lots of people said that the Russians won't bomb Ukraine because they are brothers, but afterwards it was some, you know, talkings with among Ukrainians, and they say it's unbelievable that Europe, including Germany, are helping Ukraine and Russia are bombing Ukraine. And if you know the history of the Second World War, Ukrainian people and Ukraine was the country who suffered most. The most people which died from Soviet Union was Ukrainians. All the territory of Ukraine was occupied. And nevertheless, this history, now we see otherwise situation.
And the most horrible thing that many Russian people wish us the death, to be killed by Russians, and even to erase the Ukraine from the face of world.
And you know the real story. Again, the real story from Vasilievka. The people ask the soldiers, when you will leave, and they say we won't leave. And if we leave, we have a command to erase this town from the earth, surface of earth.
Artem, how was life in Zaporizhia before the war? In the former Soviet bloc, the name of the city was famous because of the car factory and its brand Zaporozhets. But there is also the biggest nuclear plant of the whole Europe as well. What is the role of Zaporizhia within the economic, cultural and political life of Ukraine?
So Zaporizhia is one of the biggest cities in the eastern part of Ukraine, and it has great cultural role because of the history of Zaporizhia Cossacks. Maybe you've heard about them. They lived on the island Hortitsa. We have a big river, so we have lots of industrial areas. So it has its cultural, as I told, and industrial, economic role, big role economic. What about political role? So I think also it has such role because After Donetsk, which is now on the other territory, which they called DNR. This is the biggest city, and the life was good. It was safe here. We don't think about that something may happen. What about the war on it? And to tell the truth, 2014 year, we didn't feel it like the big war, and we didn't fear the future living here in Zaporozhye after these events which happened on 2014 in the eastern Ukraine.
As a doctor, how could you describe the quality of the Ukrainian healthcare system, also the state-owned and the private one as well?
So, Ukrainian medicine is now undergoing lots of changes. It is now going reformation of Ukrainian medicine system, and there are lots of private clinics, and each year there are more and more private medicine clinics in Ukraine. I'm working in the field of oncology, and after 10 years of working in government clinic, we started our own oncology private clinic because we knew how to improve the quality of medicine in the private clinic, because government clinic has its advantages, but private sector in Ukraine has more advantages. What about medicine? So we started our new oncology clinic, and the level of it is and the level of private clinics in our region is very high, because, for example, our clinic has tight connections with international medicine programs, clinical researches. We take part in lots of programs called clinical researches, international. So we had this experience for more than 10 years, and we succeeded in this area at this moment. So you understand that the world pharmaceutical agents, they also didn't expect such tragic events in Ukraine, because if they knew this, they won't invest in these regions, eastern regions, what about medicine and clinical research programs.
Now you are living in Tam. How you got here and why you chose this town to live at? Is there any huge Ukrainian community in the area you connect with?
No, it was occasional, a little bit, but when the war started, we know that we have some relatives in Germany. I have two sisters living here, and one of my sisters is now out of Germany because of her work, and her house was empty, and we know where we are going. And here is living my family, my wife and 3 kids, and I came here only 2 weeks ago to visit them, because at this moment I didn't decide where to live further, because I love my country, I have my career there, I have my own clinic, lots of ideas how to develop it, how to develop the medicine in Ukraine. But at this moment Ukraine is not a safe place for my family, and I'm planning to leave for Ukraine once more, because I have lots of stuff to do here. but future is indefinite for our family. Otherwise, we decided that my family is staying in Germany and socializing with other people because it's not safe for Ukraine now. And we understand that this conflict it won't end in nearer time. It's our feelings, and this all information that we have tells us about this. We are not so optimistic about this conflict, about this war, because it's global one, and everyone, including European people, must understand that Ukraine is not so far from here, and maybe this situation with Ukrainians going here is an instrument which Europe can help to resolve this conflict in the right way, and we Ukrainians are very grateful for Germany to invite us and to help us living safe, having all the stuff to live comfortably here. We're grateful for this. Thank you.
You have 3 children. How is their integration into the kindergarten and school system in Germany?
Yeah, I think they are integrating very well. They liked, and their parents, me and my wife, we like the system that the little child, they can choose whatever to do in the kindergarten. This feeling of freedom, I think, what about my philosophy, it's very helpful for the child to develop in the right way. So lots of stuff, lots of freedom in the kindergarten, and every day they come back home and say one more German word. So I think they integrate well.
Are there Ukrainian speaking stuff in the kindergarten and school, or how will the children be able to keep the Ukrainian language and identity? Will there be, for example, some Sunday school for Ukrainian language, or Ukrainian as part of the normal education system, or you will simply teach the children in Ukrainian and use the Ukrainian language in the everyday life at home to keep the language and the identity of the children and keep Ukrainian further?
To keep the identity being here?
Yes.
Staying in Germany?
Yes.
This is the question.
Yes. As of you thought that even if you eventually go back to work further at your clinic in Ukraine, the family would stay longer here, as you thought, or maybe you're living in both countries.
I didn't decide yet what to do, because such tragedy like war, it takes off lots of answers on your questions. I need time, but the only solid decision we had taken is that my family won't leave for Ukraine while the active phase of war is now. What about me? I must leave because lots of our life stayed in Ukraine, and I need to decide lots of questions of different importance. What about language? We are talking here in Russian. We are Russian-speaking family, and this is a totally myth that people in eastern or south Ukraine can't speak Russian, and they are charged for this or accused for this. We are speaking Russian and it's normal. What about Ukrainian language? After the situation in 2014, every year Ukrainian language is getting more and more important in Ukraine, and more people are trying to talk Ukrainian. And for example, what about myself? I speak Ukrainian fluently and I like this language, but all this experience of Soviet Union, of our family, parents, we were always talking Russian, so Russian stays the language #1 in my family. What about inside communication? But I think after this tragedy like 2022, Ukrainian language will, in many ways, it will win the first position for lots of families, for the community, Ukrainian community. So the language is the DNA of the nation, and it's normal part that Russian language is losing its position in Ukraine. So the Russians are guilty for this.
Is this process rather natural, or is it only because of it's forced by legal issues? Because there are very strong legislative actions against not only the Russian but also, for example, Hungarian or other minority languages within Ukraine, forcing, for example, only Ukrainian as school language or as a language at courts, or even eventually in the medical system. And a few days ago I just read an article that some state authorities are punishing even Zelensky, state president, because of he was not only using Ukrainian at a press conference but also Russian and English, what is quite absurd. How is it? Because it's often told also as one of the main reasons of this war that the local Russian-speaking Ukrainian citizens were in a very unpleasant situation because of this language law, forcing the Ukrainian language as the only communication form. How was it in your experience?
As I told you, it's a total myth. Or what about force about Russian language? And it's normal part of every country which has its own language to give more and more influence of native language in the country. That was happening last 7-8 years, that Ukrainian language got more and more influence in Ukraine, and it's normal for every country. So in Germany, German language, yeah, the #1, and in Ukraine it must be Ukrainian language. If you are working for the government, if you are working in medicine and so on, you must fulfill documents in Ukrainian language, and I think it's also okay. And this process, it was going for years. It wasn't like that the next day you are Russian speaking and you can't fulfill in Russian, or you can't talk in Russian, speak in Russian. No, it was years, and now you can freely speak Russian on the streets, you can freely speak Russians everywhere, Russian, but you can't fulfill the documents in Russian in many organizations, especially government ones. And I think it's normal position. As I told you, if the Russian language was forced not to use, I won't be speaking Russian. I speak Russian in my family, on the streets, on the work. Of course, I always change the language into Ukrainian when someone is talking to me Ukrainian. I'm talking with him Ukrainian. If someone is speaking with me Russian, I use Russian language. And it's the practice for all Ukraine. And it's also a myth that in the western part of Ukraine you can't use Russian, or you will be charged for it, or accused by people speaking Russian. But this situation, this war, will change the situation much more worse for Russian language. And it will be also natural way, not force. Lots of people are willing to speak now Ukrainian, and they are trying and teach this language, native language for Ukrainians, because language is a DNA, because language helps to identify the Ukrainian nation, and because Russian-speaking soldiers are killing our relatives, our people, Ukrainian people. So for lots of people, Russian language is aggressive one, but not for me. My opinion, I didn't change my opinion about Russian language. I speak it freely because I think it's not the most important to be the human, to socialize and to be Ukrainian. I will speak in Ukrainian, more Ukrainian, obviously, but with Russian-speaking people, no problem, speaking Russian.
Both Russian and Ukrainian media is spreading a lot of propaganda. What is similar and what is different of the both? What are reliable information sources from both sides, if there are any?
Okay, propaganda may give you some truth, but you must stay the person who criticizes every information you read in different media, social media, or television, set, etc. Why? Because you must understand that lots of information, these are the manipulation for your brain to think the way they want you to. So what about Russian propaganda? It's awful, and I think maybe lots of thoughts of different people and specialists that in Hitler's propaganda it was much worse than Putin's propaganda, because at that time it was on the radio to say some propaganda, and now the Russian politics has so many ways, so many directions for this propaganda that it's awful. But we must understand, and I like a Ukrainian citizen which thinks in a critical way. I understand that our Ukrainian propaganda also may give you some non-important thoughts in your head, so I choose what to believe and what to not to believe. And unfortunately, I think now Ukrainians in such way got Ukrainian propaganda not too good, and I think Ukrainian people who make the information about Russian aggression is not right in all the ways, because all this aggressiveness, it may returns in a bad for Ukrainians themselves. For example, Russian missiles which bomb the Ukrainian civilian objects, and they have Russian people, Russian politics, they have several goals by this. One of these goals is to try for Ukrainian people to tense on their president to give up in this war because of many civilians lost their lives by such bombing. And I think the next goal of the Russian politics, warriors and propaganda, bombing by these missiles, they want the Ukrainian people to become aggressive, to become very solid and strong in their hateness of Russian people, and then it may simple not to show for the Russian propaganda as Ukrainians are so narcissistic nation. The Ukrainians by themselves will show their hateness and aggressiveness. It will wound the Ukrainian nation, because Russian people, they will be persuaded by lots of these Ukrainian video with aggressiveness and with this hateness that Ukrainian nation in some way is nationalistic and in some way maybe narcissistic. And it would help the Russian people to take together and to fight for their country, for the Russia, against the Nazism. We saw now on the Russian television lots of such videos, like the sons of the relatives are dying and the relatives are persuaded that their sons were fighting with the Nazism. So it's very painful to see such video and to understand how propaganda can change the minds of people. And in the end, I want to say that propaganda is much stronger weapon than missiles, because when millions of people think in the way the politics and the country wants them, it's much more stronger weapon than the missiles, than the tanks, etc.
Anna, you were working at a beer company, but also as a journalist. How was the situation of the press in Ukraine before, and how is it now? Every region has an own public radio and TV channel, but there are also nationwide public service radio and TV channels as well, and several private ones. Latter, mostly in the hands of oligarchs. Zelensky made a new law to nationalize the private media. What do you think? In what direction will the Ukrainian press go?
In our country there is no restriction for information, and everyone could talk about what he or she wants, and press system, journalistic system is working well, I think, and many companies, journals, magazines try to be the first to have news from front border, from people who were injured, from families of died troops, and I really didn't hear about Zelensky new law, because I worked for a magazine that mostly talked about some craft businesses, interesting people, and I doesn't have connection with political issues.
You wrote a crime novel. What is it about?
My crime novel was about a girl who lost her memory and trying to find herself in a new world. and she is from Ukraine and went to Europe, and the date was when our war in 2014 begins, but I didn't write about that directly, just wrote that there is a war situation in Ukraine, and it was not really about crime, but more about love, about path, about finding yourself in the world.
Do you plan to write more books, or in the current situation, building up a new everyday life in Germany is taking all of your creative energies?
I have a lot of creative energy, but I do not have enough time for this. But I plan to write the second part of my book, and I already have one fairy tale for children, but it's not published yet, and I plan to publish it in Ukraine, or even to translate it to other languages and find a solution to publish it in Europe, in English or Deutsch.
There are several Ukrainians who are returning from Germany or other safe places to Ukraine. Your mother also have done it. Many people can't understand why quite many Ukrainians are doing it. Can you declare, for example, on the example of your mother and maybe other people you know, what can be their motivation to do it, as of here there's safety and security, and as you and your husband already mentioned when we were talking in the first part of our interview 2 weeks ago, that there is no safe part of Ukraine, because even in the theoretically safe parts can come to any conflict situation at any time.
You know that every person has their own life and things why they want to come back. I have many friends who now are coming back to Ukraine, even with small children, even with on territories near their front border. And some of them talk that there was very difficult to be to be different person in between other nations, and to find a place in other country. Somebody miss their home, their path, their I don't know, friends' houses. Some of them are tired from being far away from their husbands. Some needs some medical help who are with children, ill children. My mom came home because in Ukraine her life. Her husband is still there, my father, and she missed him, and she thought that they should be together. Of course, she planned to come to Germany again for a short period, but if the war will end soon, she just come here to close all the documents. Some noise, but if everything will be right, she will stay in Zaporizhia, because there is no reason for her to live here, no advantages in her opinion, because she doesn't know English or German, and she feel so sad here, so unrealistic world for her. She cannot communicate with anyone, just me and my children, and for socialization, this is not very good.
And how are you socializing here in Tam as Artem also already mentioned, you plan that you and the children would stay in Germany even if he returned to continue to work at his clinics and even then live a life in both countries. How you plan to integrate yourself here locally? Are you communicating with some local Ukrainians, or also having already some connections to local people here in Germany?
I am a quick reaction person, so I have many socializing contacts with native Germans, with another nations that are in Germany now, and with Ukrainian also, who came after the war started. So for me it's not a problem. The one problem is Deutsch, because I didn't have lessons for Deutsch in Ukraine. I only know English and can make a conversation in English, but from the first day I'm here, I do everyday exercises, not exercises, lessons in Deutsch, and now I feel myself, I feel enough courage to go to a supermarket to ask what I need, to talk with postman, to Verkäufer, or I even can speak with little children, because their Deutsch is around simple things like some toys and games, so it's not very tough for me now. And when Artem will come back to Ukraine, I plan to stay here with children, because for me it's on the first line the safety position of my children. And we will wait until the war will end, but I plan to find a job here, but I don't want to go to a local job. I have a plan to find something on laptop, some remote work, and try to have a job in Ukrainian, Russian, English. So for me it's a better variant, because if I come back to Ukraine, I will still have a job.
Do you still keep the contact with the redaction where you worked at in Ukraine, and how is that press product currently operating upon these conditions?
Yes, I have a contact with my magazine, and I write down the articles for them now, but the press system in our magazine is bad, because they turn to electronic format, no published editions, just internet version of magazine.
And what do you think, how can the situation of the press continue? What are the perspectives if the war will be finished soon or later? Your husband thought that you don't think that it will be finished even within a year, so you think it will be longer. How can it affect the press system of Ukraine?
I think the press system in a political area will be okay, because everybody now read about war, about situation, about news tendencies and so on. But what about some movie stars and some news about makeup? It's not necessary now for people, for most people. So I think the press will reduce the amount in war period, but after the war everything will come back to their places.